It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Let's figure out somebody who actually, let's assume Michael J. Fox and the doc got together.
Okay.
And they came up with a time machine. We'll just even say it looked like a DeLorean.
Maybe it was a DeLorean.
And they had the ability, they had the Farmer's Almanac, whatever you want to call it. And they were either able to go back in time and do the best opportunities to buy, meaning that markets got their teeth kicked in. Mm-hmm. You had the Farmer's Almanac of what was going on with the S&P 500. You bought in on the perfect days to invest. Mm-hmm. And we're going to flip the script and we're going to talk about the world's worst investor.
Sure.
Somebody who actually did not have the Farmer's Almanac, let their emotions get to them and waited for their buddies to come to them, get them excited about the markets, bought at the tippity top of the market.
Yep.
And then they ended up losing, obviously. What did that do to in the short and the long term? And here's what I think is interesting about all these different analysis. And then we have the third option that we'll talk about. But here's what I think is interesting. In both of these scenarios, and I'm going to let Bo set it up.
Sure.
Nobody ever sells. Mm-hmm. So I do want to give these behaviors, this is the positive of at least they held on to the assets through the entire process. But set this up completely, Bo.
Yeah, so what if you're the best market timer ever? And what you're going to do is we went back to 1980, and the average income, according to the Social Security Administration in 1980, was $12,513. And let's assume that you listened to the Money Guy show that wasn't around in 1980, but let's assume that you did listen to it, and you were going to save 25% of your income, or a little over $260 per month. But you said, you know what? Because I have my Farmer's Almanac, I'm only going to buy at the very bottom of a bear market. So I'm going to save my $260 a month, and I'm going to have it just build up in cash. And it's going to go to cash and go to cash and go to cash. And I'm going to assume that my cash can earn 2%. Right now today, that sounds pretty stinking good. It's going to earn 2%. And then when the market hits the very bottom day, then I'm going to buy. Well, this is what we found when we went all the way back to 1980, all the way through now. There were a couple buying opportunities, specifically October 19th, 1987, that was Black Monday. October 11th, 1990, that was the Kuwait War, the bottom of that period. October 9th, 2002, this is the one that you were talking about. This is the very bottom of the dot-com bubble. March 9th, 2009, that's one we certainly remember. That was the bottom of the Great Recession or the housing crisis. And then we can even look at this year. On March 23rd of 2020, was the lowest point of what we've begun to dub the COVID crash. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buying opportunities. Where in between these, you're going to build cash, build cash, build cash. You have a pot of money, and then on that lowest day, you're going to deploy all that cash on those days.
So
Make
here's
sense?
something I think is interesting, because we're going to be using these key dates as big parts, because this is the biggest things that have happened since 1980. There's a lot of stuff. It's just like we're in a pandemic year. Mm-hmm. And this year's been it continues to just be weird.
Sure.
I mean, you know, I have a trip that was supposed to happen tomorrow. Because of this pandemic, some things are getting thrown off once again. It's the year that keeps on giving. But I want you to know, this happens all the time, guys. And this is part of life, is that you will have the Black Monday. Mm-hmm. You'll have wars. You will have technology disruptions, like, you know, or a dot-com bubble where people just were paying ridiculous sums. It wasn't worth it. The housing crisis. Yep. I mean, these ripple effects. Bo, I even told you, because you saw the Kuwait War. I said, you realize without the Kuwait War, Brian Preston doesn't become a financial advisor. You don't get the Money Guy show. The butterfly effect from all of this stuff already lives in our lives.
Sure.
Don't let it also disrupt your investment life as well.
I love it. So this is what full-time equivalent Daniel has dubbed this investor. This is Billy the Best. Right?
Billy the Best.
That's what he called this investor.
We played some Karate Kid music in preparation for this.
So Billy the Best market timer ever saved his cash when the market bottomed out and always invested at exactly the right time. So you can actually see, again, if you're out on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, any of those places, go out to YouTube so you can see this visual. And you can kind of see the orange cash building up and then it invests. And the orange cash building up and then it invests. And orange cash building up and then it invests. Well, what we determined is throughout this 40-year cycle, Billy will have saved $127,222. That's how much money he saved. But because his timing was so good, the value of his investments at the end of 2020, on January of 2020, I'm sorry, at September of 2020, was $1.4 million.
All from doing $260 a month.
$267 a month. Nothing incredibly difficult about that.
So that's pretty powerful. That's the best. Now look, that's not reality because we don't have the time machine.
Right.
The reality is you're going to have the brother-in-law that tells you a hot stock tip or something and gets you excited at the world's worst time to invest. So let's talk about what happens if you're actually, because I've done this show before, where's Bob, the world market timer. Now, FTE Daniel, he gets creative with his names. He didn't like Bob, the world's worst market timer. He went with another route.
He went with Unlucky Ursula because
I like it, a little Disney
it works.
flavor
a little
there.
Disney. So if Unlucky Ursula was the worst market timer ever, let's walk back through our assumptions. In 1980, the average income was $12,513. Ursula knows that she's supposed to be saving 25% of her income. So she's going to save a little over $260 per month. But instead of investing at the bottom of each of these bear markets, she's going to invest at the top of each of the bull markets.
So, I mean, she's kind of a scared person.
She's
going to wait.
Until it feels good.
It feels really comfortable. You know, this is everybody around her is making money. How can she not be making money? So she waits till the tippity top, pulls the trigger. This is what the typical investor does, by the way, and then unloads all the cash that she has.
So she ends up investing in August of 1987, in July of 1990, in September of 2000, in October of 2007, and then pre-COVID, she invests in January of 2020. So again, if we look at the illustration, Ursula always invests her cash right before a market crash. Now her cash is earning 2% until then, but when the market hits the very peak, she puts it to work. So she invests at these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different times. And this is what we find. Ursula, over this 40-year period, invests the same $127,222, but her portfolio is, I'm going to say only in air quotes, only $893,000.
That's so worth repeating because, I mean, realize that this is the worst market timer since 1980. And they still end up with almost $1 million of assets doing it the
worst way
possible way you could. And this is something, you know, you could be a bad investor, and this is a more likely scenario than I think Billy the Best because you don't have the time machine. You can't go back. The flux capacitor hasn't been invented yet. So it's not going to happen. But I do think this gives you a lot of feeling good in the fact that you can be horrible at something and still be successful.
Yep.
And that's the part, I think a lot of people look at successful investing and they think of how much luck has to be involved in it. This shows, nope, you just got to be part of it. It's not timing the market, it's time in the market.
Love it.
So, and we're going to prove you, we're going to go one step further on this because you guys know, all this, my head going back and forth. Do we wait for the best time to buy? Do we wait for the worst time to buy? When should you actually try to do this the most efficient, most unemotional, and the most systematic way that ties into everything we've ever talked about here at the Money Guy Show?
Yeah, so what if you don't time the market? What's that look like? And so again, since Daniel comes up with all of our characters, we now have DCA Dave, or dollar cost averaging Dave. And this is what we know. Average income in 1980, $12,500. Dave also knows he's supposed to save 25% of his gross income, so he's going to save a little over $260 every month. But he's not going to park it in cash. He's just going to put it in the market, set it and forget it, and let it invest. He's just going to let it run and run and run and run and run. So he invests every month, no matter what. Good times, bad times.
This seems easy.
This is the boring one.
This is set it and forget it.
This is the lazy way to invest. So this is what we find, that DCA Dave doesn't try to time it, and he just does his 260. And by the way, we're investing in the S&P 500. That's all we're doing here. We're making it super, super easy. This is what we found. Dave saved the same $127,222. But by being lazy and boring and not outsmarting himself, his portfolio actually grows to almost $1.7 million.
What I think is so interesting is that this is a career. I mean, because 1980 to now, you're probably getting close to your gold watch moment.
Sure.
Because you started, I mean, I entered the workforce in the mid-90s.
Yep.
So this is somebody who is, would have been my mentor, who's now leaving the workforce. I think seeing that somebody over their lifetime saved $127,000 and now it's worth over $1.5 million, close to $1.7 million actually.
Unbelievable.
What a great savings career. And this also ties into, I've often told you guys, I grew up in a household where saving was never the issue. My parents never made great incomes, but they were great stewards with their resources. Meanwhile, my wife, my in-laws, also good savers, but they actually did something. They put the money in the Fidelity Magellan Fund, whereas my dad did CDs.
Sure.
And you can quickly see just putting the money to work, putting in something as simple as the S&P 500, the 500 biggest companies in the United States. Guys, in a lot of ways, that's good enough.
Yep.
I mean, you can do a lot of good by just being deliberate, systematic, and not letting your emotions screw it all up.
What I think is great, Brian, you already said this, you just got to show up. You just got to be involved. Because if we look at the recap, all three of these folks, Billy the Best, Unlucky Ursula, and DCA Dave, invested the exact same amount of money, a little over $127,000. Billy ended up with $1.4 million, and he really had it figured out. Ursula was clueless and couldn't have done it worse, and she ends up with almost $900,000. But DCA Dave, boring, lazy, didn't think about it, just stay consistent, $1.7 million. What I think is beautiful is all three of these folks have a great retirement portfolio. They've got a great pot of assets built up because they at least did something. You notice none of them made the choice to not invest or to not be involved in the market or to not defer gratification or to not save the dollars. They did something, and we just think if you take the easy route, it's likely going to work out better for you.
Well, I actually took something else from this.
Okay, well, I will redact all my previous statements.
Well, think about this. I think the reason we don't have a flux capacitor is because the time machines just don't yield enough dividends.
It doesn't work,
because if you're looking on the S&P 500, you actually came out better being a dollar cost averager than running the strategy of waiting for the most perfect opportune time because you have the Farmer's Almanac and then making it happen. I mean, if this thing had better alpha, mankind would have probably found a way to get the flux capacitor how to do it. So it once again shows you don't have to make wealth creation complicated. It's surprisingly, just exceedingly simple. But people make it so complicated because they don't do the behaviors that will lead to success.